to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 31 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we're discussing chapter 30 of A Game of Thrones, Eddard 7.
We'll chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we'll provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what's happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some background, compare it to the TV show, and indulge in a little pedantry. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide you some interesting information about the characters in this chapter.
Yes, please check them out.
Yes. It's a long one. Let's get the show on the road.
Yeah, let's do it.
Quick recap of what Eddard was up to last we saw him. He was retracing Jon Arryn's final days, trying to figure out what connects a book of lineages, an apprenticed bastard blacksmith called Gendry, and various brothels. Since then, his long-dreaded tournament has arrived. McKelly, why don't we give them the summary?
All right. Ser Barriston, Selmy, and Ned are holding Shiva over the body of Ser Hugh of the Vale. They agree to send his armor to his mother, and that Ned will finish paying off Ser Hugh's debts to his smith. They walk together, discussing Robert's drunken plan to fight in the melee. Selmy hopes he'll back off in the cold light of morning. Ned knows him better. They arrive at the king's tent to find him grappling with squires who cannot get his armor over his girth. Robert yells at the two Lannister boys and send them away.
Selmy and Ned convince him to not fight, as it wouldn't be fair since no one would dare touch him. Robert dismisses Ser Barriston and moans to Ned that he misses the life they lived during the rebellion, and that Ned or Jon Arryn should have been the king. But Ned points out that Robert always had the better claim to the throne.
They have a heart-to-heart, and Robert admits that he knew Joffrey was lying about Nymeria, that he dreams of leaving Westeros to be a free rider somewhere else, but the thought of Joffrey on the throne, with Cersei in his ear, prevents him. Ned half-heartedly tries to defend Joffrey, and then they reminisce about the times in the Vale as children. They have breakfast and then return to the tourney.
Ned sits with Sansa as Sandor Clegane defeats Jaime Lannister. Renly Baratheon wins 100 gold dragons from Littlefinger over this one. And then Loras Tyrell unseats Gregor Clegane, who slaughters his horse in fury and then attacks Ser Loras. Only swift intervention by the Hound prevents Gregor from killing Ser Loras. The king calls a halt to the sibling sword fight, and Ser Loras names the Hound as winner of the tournament for saving his life. Sandor is in the unfamiliar position of being cheered by the crowd.
A kid named Anguy from Dorne wins the archery contest, and the flame sword-wielding red priest Thoros of Myr wins the melee. A feast ensues, where Ned is feeling as good as he has since stepping foot in King's Landing. Arya is black and blue from her dancing lessons, and Sansa reckons she must be a terrible dancer. Ned begins to doubt the wisdom of his choice, but Arya wants only Syrio Forel.
Later, Ned ponders his investigation. Robert has bastards all over the Seven Kingdoms. His first was father in the Vale when they lived with Jon Arryn. He had another being fostered by the Castellan of Storm's End, and plenty more besides. Could Cersei be worried about claims to the throne? Seems unlikely, as bastards have few rights. His ruminations are interrupted by a visitor, Ser Varys, in plain clothes and speaking plainly, without the oily sycophancy of his small council persona. Varys reveals that the Lannisters plotted to kill Robert in the melee, and that only Ned's intercession saved him. Ned thinks that Varys should have said something earlier, but Varys said he did not, until today, know that he could trust Ned. Ned asks how Jon Arryn died, and Varys names the poison, Tears of Lys, and that Ser Hugh was the poisoner. Ned asks why now. Varys replies that it was because he, Jon Arryn, was asking questions.
This, in my opinion, hands down the best chapter we've gotten to so far. There's so many of the questions and speculations and ruminations that we've had that get answered, at least...
Well, they're certainly coming together. They're
yes.
Not necessarily answered, but they are coalescing.
Yes, good stuff.
But be careful, because all of that is only true if you take Varys at his word.
Absolutely, I was going to say that. Yeah.
And I mean, I've been skeptical about several of the witnesses we've talked to here, notably Grand Maester Pycelle.
Pycelle, right?
And
yeah.
Varys is certainly no more trustworthy than Pycelle. But there is a sort of, the word I'm going to use is verisimilitude.
Okay.
Sort of the appearance of truthfulness about
Yes.
what he's saying. It fits with what we're reading. It fits with the narrative, and therefore I'm inclined to believe it.
Right, yeah. So, for as Simon pointed out last episode, for those astute listeners, you may have already figured out who the young knight from the Vale was that Ser Gregor killed. But now in this chapter, you learn that it was indeed Ser Hugh of the Vale.
Jon Arryn's former squire,
Yes.
who was elevated to knighthood in an unseemly haste after
Yes.
Jon Arryn's death.
If you remember, it was during the jousting that Ser Gregor's lance rode up into Ser Hugh's neck because his gorget was loose and killed him. And Sandor did not think it was an accident.
Yes, he never did. He said that to Sansa in the last chapter.
Yes, he said where Ser Gregor's lance goes where Gregor wants his lance to go.
So now there was the question of, was there a motive for it beyond just like the joy of killing someone? Well, now there's a possible motive. If the Lannisters are implicit or complicit in the death of Jon Arryn and Ser Hugh was their tool, then getting him out of the picture seems like a smart move.
Yep, and one thing we know is that House Clegane owes fealty to House Lannister.
Yeah.
So, and Ned, before he knows of any of this stuff, before he has this conversation with Varys, he wonders, is this my fault?
That the kid is dead.
Yeah, that he's dead because I wanted to talk to him. A Lannister bannerman has killed him. Is this fall on me?
Yeah. That word that Ned wanted to talk to him had reached the wrong ears, and that's why he was killed.
And of course, this was before Varys tells Ned that he believes that Ser Hugh was the poisoner. So he might have a different opinion of the situation now.
But, I mean, the one thing you can say, if Ser Hugh is the poisoner, if that's true, then he is not the instigator of this.
Right.
There's no reason for that squire to murder his lord.
That's true.
So he was working on someone's behalf. So, again, going back to Cersei was out of town when it happened, well, she might have said, here's this.
Right.
Season his salad with that next week while I'm out of town.
Yeah, you just wonder, though, where Lysa's getting her information from, unless maybe, I don't know, it doesn't seem like Varys would have gone and given her this similar information. So where did Lysa get the information from to send the letter to Cat to start this whole investigation?
Well, that's an interesting question. Maybe, what about Ser Hugh? Maybe Ser Hugh, racked with guilt or something after the murder, says to her, doesn't confess to his own part in it, but says,
okay, yeah,
I know for a fact that he was poisoned here.
And I know who it was.
And it was Cersei Lannister that did it.
Yeah.
And maybe Lysa says, all right, I'm out of here. And says to the king, hey, will you knight that guy because he's awesome?
Right. It could be. Yeah, that could all play out that way.
Because I'm still a little bit perturbed by the knighting of him. Because that's really a job for Robert. And if Robert wouldn't reward him for killing Jon.
Right.
Cersei may ask him to.
Yeah. All we know
Robert would then say, why? Why do you want me to make this kid a knight?
Right. The only thing we know is that Ser Barriston says that he really wanted to be knighted. But what squire doesn't really want to be knighted? Right. So there's got to be more to it than just, please.
We did have that conversation right at the start of this when we said that, a squire who was on the cusp of being knighted, it would be unfortunate for them if their lord died. Right. And someone might take pity on them in that respect.
Yeah. Yeah, much like Sir Roderick in the last Cat chapter when he expresses his negative opinion of tournaments. Ned also says that war should not be a game. This was needless. It shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So he too, of the North, that's what Cat said is the reason that Sir Roderick has such a negative opinion of tourneys. So it must just be a belief in the North that it's not, these things aren't meant for play.
So he leaves it to the Silent Sisters to handle Ser Hugh's final preparation for his burial. I guess we don't know exactly what's going to happen to him.
Yeah, I think they use beetles to eat off the skin.
Ooh.
I have some info in the background about how the Silent Sisters do their thing.
He asked them to send the armor to the mother in the Vale, and he says that he will deal with the debts that Ser Hugh racked up with the blacksmiths for his armor.
Yeah, again, before he knows about Ser Hugh's possible role in Jon Arryn's death, he said he paid for his armor in the ultimate way, I guess, basically.
So Ned and Selmy go to the king's tent, Robert's squires are trying to get his armor on him, and Ned puts it bluntly, "You're too fat for your armor."
That is the Stark way right there. At least the Ned Stark. Sansa might have handled that more tactfully. Ned, not so much. He took one look and said, "Robert, you're too fat for your armor."
In the show, Robert freezes when he's told that. Then he laughs. Then the squire laughs. Then Robert looks at the squire and says, "Is that funny?"
That is a little funny, I have to admit. Yeah, and he sends them after the breastplate stretcher, which apparently doesn't exist.
Yes.
So sending them on a wild goose chase.
Yes.
But one thing that he does notice, one thing Ned does notice about the squires is that they have the Lannister look about them.
Yeah.
And so he inquires, and turns out, yes, they're Lancel and Tyrek Lannister, both cousins of Queen Cersei.
Too many of that tribe, too close to Robert.
Yep.
For Ned's liking.
And Robert says, "My wife insisted I take these two as my squires." So Cersei directly was involved in these two being chosen to be his squires.
You know, once my dad sent me down to the sort of garden shed to get the striped paint. And I was too young to see it. I was like, striped
Type
I was
paint.
going through all of them. I couldn't find any striped paint, Dad.
How clever.
Yeah. So Barriston and Ned explain why it just would not be a good idea to participate in the melee. They focus on the fact that no one's going to fight him. No one would voluntarily hit the king, and so he's going to win, and it's going to be pointless.
Yeah, and Ser Barriston was smart there, and Ned realizes where he's going with it, because if they had said, this is dangerous, you could get hurt, that would have only
Fueled his fire.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So instead you mentioned that, if you enter this, you're just going to win because you're the king, and that kind of does the opposite, has the opposite effect. He's like, what? And he gets really angry about this. He throws, I think it's the breastplate or something, at Ser Barriston, who nimbly dodges it, and then he tells him to get out.
So Ned stays around.
Yep.
Robert says that Ned or Jon should have become the king instead of him, but Ned makes the point that Robert has the better claim.
Yes.
That we mentioned this before, that Robert was related to the Targaryens.
Yes, his grandmother.
Yeah, was Rhaelle Targaryen.
Yeah.
And he also defeated Rhaegar in single combat, and Rhaegar was the heir. So
Right.
if you defeat the heir, you get rid of all the rest of them, and you've got a decent lineage claim. Yeah.
Yep. I think the Maesters use the fact that he is a descendant of the Targaryens as the official reason for his claim, but I think the people respect and they look at it as he killed Rhaegar in single combat, mano y mano, as the reason.
So he didn't ever want to marry Cersei, no great surprise there. It was Jon Arryn's idea to bind Tywin Lannister to him, which is, the biggest possibility of the Seven Kingdoms falling apart probably would be descent between the throne and Lannisters.
Right. Yeah. And
Ned was always going to be on their side.
Right. The Arryns, the Vale was going to be on their side through Jon Arryn.
The Riverlands probably.
From the Tullys and the Ned's connection there. So it was going to be the Lannisters likely if Viserys ever did make it across the narrow sea with his army.
Yeah. And in particular, not just the breaking apart sort of by internecine squabbling, but also if the Targaryens came back,
right,
it would be better to have them on the same side.
Yeah. Although it doesn't look like that's working out as planned so well.
Yeah.
They don't.
Well,
the best laid plans of mice and men.
Yeah.
But then Robert gets a little bit introspective, and he starts talking about kind of interesting stuff about his own view on himself and his reign. And the first thing he says is that he was never so alive when he was winning the throne, and never so dead since he won it.
Yeah.
And then he verbs a noun. He says, "Look what kinging has done to me. I can't even fit into my own armor. It's the kinging. That's what it is." Yeah.
He admits to knowing that Joffrey was lying over the wolf.
Yeah, and we knew that. We knew he
knew. Yeah.
He just didn't have the backbone to fight Cersei on it. as much as needed to be. Eventually he caved.
Yeah. So he wants to give up the crown and go to the free cities and be a sellsword. I think in the summary we said a free rider. That was because I wrote that, but you're right. He said a sellsword, not a free rider. I should be more careful.
The sellsword king, he dubs himself. Yeah. Wouldn't the musicians love that or something like that? And I think he would do it.
Oh, yeah. And it's actually somewhat to his credit that the one thing that stops him is the horror that he would leave behind, namely a puppet King Joffrey with the marionette to his mother.
And not only is it puppet king, he's like a little sociopath.
Yeah, exactly.
King,
those two together. God.
Yeah. But, I wonder if maybe all the drinking and the womanizing is something to do with how miserable he is. It's an escape from, he just really is not meant to be king, and he's kind of trapped because he is the king. You can't really give that up very easily. So
I gotta say, I think some of it is the marriage.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? I think if he was married to someone he truly loved, he'd be okay. I don't think he would be a diligent king, but I don't think he would be a drunk who was off in the brothels all the time, siring bastards.
He mentions when he says that Cersei forbade him from participating in the melee, he says Lyanna would have never have done that. So Ned
corrects him. Ned says, "You were in love with that girl. She would have told you not to fight."
She said you had no business being in that melee.
Yeah. So there's good comedy when Robert repeatedly berates Ned for interrupting him.
Drink!
And then
that's what he keeps saying.
When he finally claims to be a good king, Ned doesn't say anything.
He says, Ned eventually does start to say something, and he says, just tell me I was better than Ares. You never could lie for love nor honor.
I notice he doesn't. He still leaves it hanging.
Yeah,
but presumably everyone agrees he is better than Ares.
At least post Tywin Lannister era Ares.
Yeah.
Tywin's still alive, but at least post Tywin Lannister as Hand of the King Ares, when he started to really go over the edge. But Ned's silence certainly speaks volumes to what he thinks of his ruling.
But Robert believes that Ned's arrival will fix things and create a reign worthy of the songs.
Yeah. It's this whole thing is kind of an unusual moment of clarity. Usually he's in either a drunken stupor or a bravado based. I'm King Robert. So it's good that he says, now that you're here, you and I will create a reign worthy of song. And that's possible, certainly, but that would require him to do the right thing, such as lay off the booze a bit, participate in ruling, and listen to Ned.
Yeah,
3 things I don't think.
It does get Ned fantasizing about what this might look like. Yeah, proving the Lannisters' guilt, getting Cersei and Jaime out of the picture, and then perhaps, if necessary, defeating Tywin in battle.
Yes, you could just see him sitting there going, "Oh, these are great ideas."
And he thinks that might get Robert back in the saddle, and perhaps. So Ned joins the fantasy as well.
Yeah. So then the two of them walk to the tourney together, and Ned had promised to sit with Sansa. But when he takes Robert to his spot, he notices that Cersei is nowhere to be seen, which gives him another little boost of excitement. But then he sits down with Cersei, and she's so engrossed she barely notices he's there. Did I say Cersei?
You did say
Sorry.
Cersei. Yeah.
He sits with Sansa. If he sat with Cersei,
that'd be really odd. Yeah.
He sits with Sansa.
Given that you said she wasn't there.
He goes back to the castle.
Yeah. So he really enjoys the fact that the Hound beats Sir Jaime.
Yeah. And
then marvels at the almost 8-foot frame of Gregor Clegane.
He compares him to Hodor.
Yeah, bigger than Hodor, he says.
Yeah. Hodor, the simple-minded stable boy from Winterfell. He's even bigger than him.
Ned thinks about the troubling rumours that surround Gregor Clegane, including that he was not only the man to smash the brains in of the 2 Targaryen children, Rhaegar and Elia Martell's... Sorry, the children were not Rhaegar and Elia Martell. The parents of the children were Rhaegar and Elia Martell. Their children were Rhaenys and Aegon, and they're the 2 children who were killed at the end of Robert's rebellion.
Right.
Also that he raped Elia before murdering her too.
Yeah, and then he kind of ruminates over the life that Gregor has at Clegane's Keep and all the things that have gone on there, such as he's rumors that he was involved in his father's death. He died in a hunting accident, and that there was a sister.
We know from Sam Tarly that that's not always true.
That's right. And that there was a sister, Clegane's sister, and she mysteriously died, and that his first 2 wives have also died. Yeah. He's preparing to marry a 3rd time, and there's other things going on in that place.
And the interesting side note that Sandor left Clegane Keep and never went back the day his father died. As soon as Ser Gregor was in charge, Sandor was out of there and never went back.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah. So Loras defeats the Mountain using a trick. His horse is a mare in heat, and Clegane uses huge ungelded stallions. And
you can't really blame him for that, being that he is 8 feet tall. He's going to need a large, big powerful horse.
That's true. But the stallion gets a little bit unruly with the mare, and he can't ride him properly, and this allows Ser Loras to knock him off his horse.
And I wondered about that. You'd think there'd be something in the rule books, because that could happen anytime you wanted to win. If someone was using such a stallion, you could find a mare in heat. Yeah. And
but I guess it's interesting though, because obviously this is slightly preparing for true battle, and would you do the same trick in true battle, because you'd be disturbing the horses of your teammates too.
It's true. That's true.
But then again, if your horse happened to be a mare, then she might at some point.
Right.
Can we hold off a week, please?
This battle, really not good timing.
It's going to be all kinds of mess out there.
Yeah, this comes up in a conversation between, I think, is Renly and Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, and Barristan Selmy overhears it, and he does not. He says there's no place in the tournaments for tricks like that. Yes, he does not approve.
No.
So one thing I noticed is that after Ser Loras beats Ser Gregor, knocks him off his horse, and then Ser Gregor kills his horse for being unruly, and then he goes after Ser Loras, and right before he whacks him, kills him with his sword, Sandor steps in, and the two of them kind of start fighting, and Ned notices that Gregor keeps swinging to kill, and Sandor never swings to kill, even though Gregor has no protection on his head. He never swings back. He just is defending himself.
Yeah.
And that, I just don't know why that might be, other than possibly some tie that binds, even though there's such dislike between the two of them.
Interesting point. So Ser Loras and the Hound are due to square off in the final.
Yeah.
But given that the Hound has just saved his life, Ser Loras hands the victory to the Hound. And the crowd go crazy, I think partly for the gesture of Ser Loras, but the Hound is like, oh, check me out.
Yeah, I get to walk off to the cheers. I was thinking about, certainly I'm sure he owes a debt to Sandor, but it's not like he needed the money necessarily.
Good point.
And it can really, right. It can really only add to his legend and the love that the small folk have for him is by doing this chivalrous, gallant act of giving Sandor
you're absolutely
victory.
right. Yeah. So Ned's as happy as he's ever been in King's Landing.
Yeah,
the Lannisters haven't really been around all day. The girls are getting along. Arya is clearly loving her dancing lessons. She says of her bruises that Syrio Forel says, every hurt is a lesson and every lesson makes you better.
All right, yeah.
So if you see bruises on my son, he'll be better at chemistry for them. So he thinks long and hard about, so now he's back. Now Ned's back in his room.
So that was there was a feast afterward, and Arya and Sansa were actually getting along. Sansa said, "You should have been there. It was so amazing," which is unusual for Sansa to say. She usually doesn't want Arya around.
But you were perhaps giving a sort of rose-tinted view of that. It was more like, you missed it all. You're such an idiot. You could have
been that way too.
Instead, you're dancing with, I don't know, sticks or something.
Yeah. She sees all the bruises and she's like, you must be a terrible dancer.
So back in his room, Ned thinks long and hard about all the things he's learned. Now we're thinking again back to CSI King's Landing.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
How did Jon Arryn die? Robert's got plenty of bastards. What was Jon interested in?
Yep.
There was no mistaking gender for anyone but Robert's son.
No doubt.
Definitely a Baratheon. Couldn't possibly be Renly's, and almost certainly not Stannis's.
Yeah.
Man's too
Renly's too young, and It's just not in Stannis to do something like that.
And then there's a sort of like a general sort of, well, could it be that Cersei was worried about bastards being legitimized in some way? But then the law just works against them. There's nothing in the law that would give any base-born child any kind of threat to a true-born child. So,
and he has a history of being very kind and generous to his bastards. He's got a bastard at Storm's End named Edric Storm, and he's got a bastard that he fathered back when he was a teen in the Vale called Maya Stone. Ned is thinking back about how even after Robert lost interest in the mother, he still made Maya. He still made play dates to go play with the little girl. So it can't be just the fact that he is a bastard, because
and we know that someone was paying Gendry's apprenticeship, and we don't.
Right.
I mean, obviously, the suspicion is it's someone either directly Robert or indirectly for Robert, looking after him as well. But then, what has this all got to do with the brothels? What has this all got to do with the Book of Lineages?
Yeah.
And what does all that bring together to make you be vulnerable to assassins? What is it? See, that's the thing. Varys tells him it was. I mean, we're coming to Varys now, but Varys ends with it was for asking questions. But Jon Arryn was obviously asking questions and getting answers that he understood.
Right.
Ned is asking the same questions, but he has no
idea what
the answers mean. It doesn't mean anything to him yet.
And Ned thinks, he's kind of thinking about all this, and he feels certain that the dagger and Bran's fall are all tied into Jon Arryn's death, even though they don't necessarily seem to be related. He feels like there is some connection. Now, I thought maybe, when you're obsessing over something, you can kind of see ties to it from all kinds of directions, but he feels like they're connected in some way.
Yeah. So Varys has slipped past many guards to get to the door of Ned's chambers, and Harwin knocks and says there's someone here to see you, and he lets him in. Varys is in disguise, not his usual voice, drab clothes, smelling of sweat instead of perfume.
And now I'm going to take a departure here, and you're wondering why I have that word written there. I'm guessing.
But now I actually think I know where you're going to go with this.
You asked me in the last Ned chapter who I thought it was that paid for Gendry's apprenticeship. You remember it was a guy that showed up, paid the apprentice fee, and he was wearing robes, and he was shorter and stooped and all that. And I said, I think I know who it is, but I don't want to say yet. I think it was Varys, because Varys has the ability to be a mummer, to do acting type things when need be. I think he put on a different persona to go pay that apprentice fee.
It's a theory. I like it. So Varys calls Robert a fool to Ned's face.
He says, I know you're friends, but let's face it, he's a fool.
Yep.
And I think what he means is he's a fool. He doesn't see all of these things going on around him and all the plots working against him.
I think more than that, I think he thinks he's a drunken oaf as well.
Yes. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah. So his spies have told him of a plot to kill Robert in the melee that already happened. So this is not very useful information at this point, other than to ingratiate yourself. Ned argues, well, it's not Cersei because she tried to forbid it. She said he absolutely could not. But Varys makes the very good point, and Ned admits to this, the best way to get Robert to do something is to forbid him from doing it.
Exactly.
Especially in front of everyone.
Right, that's where I was going to go. Yeah. She didn't just say, in their own chambers, I forbid you from doing this. Yeah. She said it in front of the King's Guard, in front of everyone that was at that feast around them. So she knows Robert too.
Assuming this is true, thankfully Ned and Ser Barriston were able to talk him out of it for different reasons. Partly because he couldn't get his fat girth into his armor. Partly because he couldn't really fight in a melee because no one would fight him.
Yes.
Which obviously he would have found out when he got out there was not true. At least one person was going to fight him to the death.
Yeah, and Robert Ned says exactly what you just said. Well, no one's going to touch him if he's out there. And he said, in all that chaos, what if someone accidentally killed the king, and wouldn't they be beside themselves with grief? And then Cersei, the sweet, loving Cersei, would pardon the man in all his grief and forgive him.
Yeah. Or behead him.
Yeah, one or the other. Yeah, I think the beheading one seems more likely.
Yeah, I mean, given what happened to Ser Hugh.
Yes. Right.
So Varys says that he didn't confide in Ned before the melee because he didn't trust him.
Yeah.
And Ned is incredulous. You didn't trust me?
Right. You're the master of whisperers.
Yeah. But now Varys is sure of Ned and thinks that Ned has, that both of them have the same interests at heart.
Yeah.
The well-being of Robert and the realm.
Yes.
But that Ned is in a better position because should Cersei ever decide that Varys is in her way, she could have him beheaded in an instant. And she cannot do the same to Ned.
Right. And not only is he in a better position, but he's in such a better position that he believes Cersei fears him.
Yeah, yeah.
If you believe that Peter Baelish was being accurate when he showed Ned the spy for Cersei and said that Cersei is taking quite an interest in you, that fits.
Yeah, so...
she fears him because of his influence over Robert, basically.
Yeah.
No one else really has any influence over Robert except for her. He appeases her. It's the easiest way for him to deal with her. Now, Ned, he actually loves, so he has influence over him that way.
So Varys confirms that it was poison. It was a poison that the Westerosi are not familiar with, called the Tears of Lys, which is odorless and colourless and clears itself out of your system so it leaves no trace.
I guess that's why Maester Pycelle was not familiar with it.
Quite so.
Or so he says.
So he says. And then further, Varys confirms that it was Ser Hugh that administered the poison to his lord, Jon Arryn. So there we are.
Yeah. Varys mentions that Ser Hugh owed everything to Jon Arryn, and then, that Ser Hugh stayed in King's Landing and was very was really prospering, and he said, I love seeing the youth prosper. And Varys mentions that the same thing Ned was wondering at the beginning of the chapter was, is it coincidence that right before I got to talk to Ser Hugh he was killed? And Varys said, did you notice that fact, that right before you got to talk to him he was killed by a Lannister bannerman? It's not coincidence.
One of the last things that Varys points out to Ned is that the people plotting against Robert are going to try again. Yep. They're not going to be done just because this one was stopped. And that Ned's presence will speed that process along. The fear of Ned and the fear of Ned getting Robert back on track, I think, will help to speed things along. So one thing that Ned mentions is that he thinks the Kingsguard would protect Robert, but Varys is like, don't trust them. They're not the Kingsguard of old.
Right.
The only one of the 7 that he trusts is Barristan Selmy. The rest of them, he said, are either already in Lannister's pay or useless.
And he specifically mentions Sir Jaime. He said, we know what his word is worth, which you and I had talked about in the first place. Why would you keep him on when, what he did may have been for the right reasons? He still broke his vow, so...
Yeah. Vow doesn't mean as much to him as it does to Ned. That's for
right,
sure.
That's for sure.
Give us some background.
All right. So at the very beginning of the chapter, when they're looking at Ser Hugh's body, the Silent Sisters are the ones that have prepared his body, and they're going to send his armor and remains back to the Vale. And so the Silent Sisters, they live a life of prayer and contemplation and good works. They bring solace to the living and peace to the dead. But sometimes girls and women are sent to become Silent Sisters as punishment. So there's that. It is said that the Silent Sisters are always glad to welcome widows. And people of Westeros are uneasy about and wary of the Silent Sisters, mostly because they deal with the dead. The Silent Sisters prepare men for the grave, and it is considered ill fortune to look upon the face of death, which is mentioned in the very beginning of this chapter. And the belief that their tongues are removed is a myth. I guess you might not have known that was a belief, but if you did believe that, is a myth. They are silent because of piety.
So the Kingsguard, let me take you through the Kingsguard. So as well as Jaime Lannister and Ser Barristan Selmy, we have the 2 that Varys names as being on the Lannister payroll. So Boros Blunt, who is also known as Boros the Belly. He's House Blunt is from the Crown Lands, and so...
Do you really want a member of the Kingsguard whose nickname is the Belly? I don't think it's
Robert might.
If it was the washboard stomach, maybe.
Maybe that's what it used to be. The washboard belly. They just dropped the washboard over the years. So he's from the Crown Lands, so maybe that means he owes fealty to the Baratheons of King's Landing, but
Right.
he's on the payroll apparently. Sir Meryn Trant is the other one that Varys mentions by name. He's from the Stormlands, so he owes fealty to House Baratheon of Storm's End, but he has a droopy eye. So there you are, little physical features of Blunt and Trant.
Right.
The other three are Preston Greenfield, who would be from House Greenfield, who owe their fealty to House, drumroll, Lannister.
Oh, boy.
Mandan Moore, from House Moore, from the Vale of Arryn. So there's one, fingers crossed.
Yep.
You might look out for him. And then Aris Oakhart, House Oakhart are in the Reach, and so they owe their fealty to Lord Tyrell. So, not great news that the two who seems like they would have fealty to the Baratheons are on the Lannister payroll.
Yeah, of course, being that they're members of the Kingsguard, their fealty should 100% be to the king, but as we've seen, that might not always be the case. So a little bit about Sir Loras Tyrell. He's 16. He's the elder brother of Marjorie Tyrell, who, if you remember from the last Ned chapter, Renly was carrying around a picture of Marjorie Tyrell because he thought, he was told anyway, that she looked like Lyanna Stark, which Ned disagreed with. And I think you mentioned this at the beginning of the chapter, that Loras won the last major tournament and all but won this one. I would have liked to have seen that final match. That would have been pretty interesting. Although I cannot help but notice that when the gloves came off, he got his ass handed to him by the mountain.
In the structures of the tournament, he was winning. But when the mountain drew his sword and started waving it around, it took several men to protect Loras from being decapitated.
Yeah, I imagine he's not alone in that department.
Yeah. So, in comparison with the TV show, Selmy and Ned start this part with the body of Ser Hugh and talking to the Silent Sisters. But Ned sees Robert on his own, not with Barristan and Selmy.
Okay.
There's only one squire, just Lancel Lannister. The other one's dropped as being redundant.
Yep, sure.
The conversation between Ned and Robert is very similar. We never see Jaime or the Hound joust. I mean, neither of them seem to be taking part in the tournament. They're both always up in the crowd, so it's interesting that they are part of the tournament. There is no archery nor melee. Robert was going to joust.
Oh, okay.
There's no second feast. There was no first feast, if you remember.
Right, that's right.
This is Littlefinger's dream, a much cheaper tournament. So Renly and Littlefinger do have the 100 golden dragon bet, but it's on the mountain versus Sir Loras.
Okay, yep.
Peter, before the fight, asks what he can do with 100 golden crowns, and Renly suggests he could buy himself a friend.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah. Cutting humor there.
Renly chose Loras and so wins the bet. So Varys and Ned do have the conversation, but there was no sneaking into Ned's chambers. He just came during the day
in.
as Lord Varys. So
no
they're a little bit up and down in the show about the secrecy.
Yeah.
Like Ned was being secretive, but then he just rode up to see the blacksmith.
Hopped off his horse on the side of the road.
So Pedantry Corner, not an awful lot in this one, but I mean it's because it was too good. I was too captivated to be looking out for pedantry on this.
Right, yeah. This was a good chapter. Yeah. I really liked this chapter.
Episode Bonanza, I guess we'll make a decision after the next recording because we've recorded enough to keep it going at this moment, right?
Yeah.
So next time, do we record one or two?
I hate to be indecisive about it, but we both really want to keep the Episode Bonanza going, but at the same time, it is getting increasingly difficult to get 2 episodes in a week.
But COVID-19 might just make it happen. It might.
If there is a silver lining, it's more podcast episodes.
We are also thinking about recording remotely from one another, doing our bit for stamping out the virus. So if the quality drops off on a couple of forthcoming episodes, please forgive. We are just trying not to infect each other's families.
Yep.
All right, so in conclusion, can we trust Varys?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. All of this information is very revealing and very interesting. You know, he could have some other agenda. He's very good at selling this. Yeah. Of all the people that have come to Ned or that Ned has talked to, his information seems the most legit and believable.
And partly because it's what Ned wants to believe.
Yeah,
it fits with his worldview. And so that's why there's just a grain of like, you're just telling him what he wants to hear.
Right. And he's also an accomplished actor. So he might be able to sell it better than the other two.
Is it possible Ser Hugh died accidentally? I don't think so. I think
Boy, that would be quite the coincidence.
Sandor, who I'm guessing Sandor is not part of any kind of plot, he just watched the fight and thought it was on purpose.
Yeah.
So even minus the motive, he thought it was intentional. And now we clearly have a very strong motive for the Lannisters to silence.
I guess it's possible. I mean, we saw what Gregor did to Sandor as children when he played with a toy he couldn't have cared less about. It's possible that Ser Hugh offended Ser Gregor in some way. Maybe he stepped on his foot.
Jousting with him?
Yeah, that. Pointing a lance at him.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah.
But it seems highly unlikely that this is just a coincidence.
Who raised Ser Hugh up and why? I mean,
Right.
if he did kill Jon Arryn, somebody in serious power was happy about it. If Ser Hugh is the person who killed Jon Arryn, he's been rewarded heavily by someone in very significant power.
Yes, because it was the king himself. Any knight can knight someone. This was the king himself that knighted him. So.
And I think none of us think it's the king who called for Jon Arryn's death. Yeah.
Like Varys said, I don't think he is paying enough attention to be involved in any of this espionage if it's going on like we think it is.
So what's true and what's fable about Gregor Clegane? He's obviously nuts.
Yes.
Killing his horse just for being a little randy. Seems very unpleasant.
He's got some sociopathic tendencies, that's for sure.
Yeah. But it is interesting that you pointed out that Gregor is trying to decapitate Sandor, but Sandor is just trying to defend himself and Dolores at the same time.
That struck me as interesting.
Yeah.
Did you, in your comparison with the TV show, did you mention about the difference in the fight between Gregor and Sandor? What was that?
I don't think it was a difference. I think it was mentioned in the book too. When the king calls a halt to it.
Oh yeah, that's right. It wasn't.
When the king calls a halt to it, the hound Sandor immediately drops to his knees, sort of like an act of fealty towards the king.
Yeah.
And by doing so, he avoids a vicious blow from his brother, which whistles just above his head.
It was the visual imagery of the show that was a little more impactful than the way it was in the book. Yeah.
So is Ned making any progress on his investigation? I mean, like he's asking the same questions, seemingly, that Jon Arryn asked, but he doesn't understand the questions or the answers.
Right.
Jon Arryn, either the assassins were concerned enough just by the questions, or they
felt like
Arryn was
getting closer than Ned is.
Exactly, yeah. Or maybe not. Maybe Ned is as close, and they're now after him.
Yeah.
You know?
Ned just doesn't realize he's as close.
Yeah.
So,
but it definitely feels like he's just following someone else's footsteps, not understanding why they were headed that way.
Yeah, he doesn't know where these footsteps are leading.
Yeah,
He's just following.
Whereas the people who made the footsteps knew why they were taking those steps.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Yep.
And so there's still a piece missing for all this to fall together for him.
Yep. Well, anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks.
All right. Well, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, not on TikTok.
Yeah. And go out and give us positive reviews. That'll help get the word out.
It really would. It really does help. It makes a big difference.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.